I'm going to show you how you can turn this into this. The number one ingredient for paper mache is paper. You can use newspaper, or I prefer not to use shiny like ad paper, but anything that's kind of got a more matte finish. This is actually paper that's newspaper paper that was never printed on, that I got from a local newspaper office. So this is what I'm using, but you can use whatever you want. You can use regular newspaper because you're going to paint over it in the end anyway. Also, you're going to need the paste to stick the paper mache together. So what this is, it's a mixture of flour, water, and Elmer's glue, and salt. You don't want it too thick because you want to make it last, and you're going to put a lot of thin coats on your whatever paper mache shape you're making. So this is about the consistency, a little bit like a melted milkshake. That sounds good. Okay, so let's get started. If you're gonna make a piñata, you're gonna need a basic shape to be kind of the framework for putting your paper mache over. So I choose this balloon because it's nice and big. So this is what we're gonna use. And then plus there's plenty of room inside. Once the paper mache is dry, there's plenty of room to put candy. All right, so all you do to start is have a good size workspace so that you can spread out. I would strongly suggest wearing an apron if you're messy like me. All right, so what we do is you take your strip of paper and you dip it into pasty solution so that it's all the way dunked down in, and then you use your fingers like this to kind of pinch off the excess. So what you have is kind of a strip that's soaked but not too bad. All right, so then we just lay it on here. Lay it on whatever form you're gonna take. I think I'm gonna back the video up a little bit so you can see better. Okay, so we're just gonna dunk, pinch with 2 fingers, and apply it to whatever shape you're gonna use. Dunk. And you can kind of crisscross if you want to give it a little extra added strength. Just smooth it down. It's kind of easier to use shorter strips, but you can use a little bit longer if you don't mind having a little longer strip to deal with. And for the first layer, I just kind of overlap them just a little bit. And that's all you do to get the first coat. You just cover up all the colored balloon part. Okay, so now we have our first layer of really wet paper mache on there. And don't worry about this little end sticking out. That will get covered eventually, but for now we want that to stick out because we're going to use this to hang our piñata while it dries. I also like to use a little bit of tissue paper. I wouldn't use tissue paper for the main strips, but when I'm between layers, it's nice to have a little bit of tissue paper to lay on here, and it gives it a little extra strength. But see how it comes apart right away? It kind of gives it a little extra strength, plus it soaks up the extra juice that you didn't wick off with your fingers. So just kind of go around and press it down kind of evenly. This is actually was left over from Christmas, so it's got tape on it. And if it's a little bit dry like this, you can either add a little more juice to it to stick it down or tear it off. Okay, there. It doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to put a lot more layers on. This is just layer number 1 out of 5 or 6. There you go. And now you have to let it dry, and it takes quite a while to dry. So I'll give you an example of one I started last night, and it has one layer. So I'm going to set this aside. All right, so here is my paper mache balloon with just one layer of paper on it. And I put some more strips over top, so actually it's got 1.5. But I used a little twisty tie at the top of the balloon. Make sure you can see that. Oh, I used a little twisty tie at the top of the balloon so that I could hang it and not be touching anything in the kitchen while it dried. So I'm going to go ahead and put another coat on this. Take a little bit of tissue. Just going to put this on there to give it a little shape. Wasp nests are not completely round on top. They got kind of a little bit of a ledge. So I'm just trying to give it a little bit of more of a bump. To make it look a little more realistic. Whoa, that looks like a bee's nest shape to me. All right, I'm gonna put a little more tissue on there. Just kind of even out those lumps, which eventually they'll be evened out anyway. But I just want it to look nicer as I go. That looks pretty good. All right, so we're gonna let that dry. That looks pretty good. Don't worry about it being perfect, because you're going to put more layers over the top. After you have a couple of layers of paper mache, you have to add wire so that you can have something to hang the piñata with. Crisscross the two wires at the bottom of the piñata and then bring the loose ends up to the top for hanging. Now, in order to make the wasp nest look more textured like an actual wasp nest, I'm going to apply thinner paper, in this case a napkin, to the body of the piñata very lightly so that I'm able to manipulate the fibers to look like the little details on a wasp nest. So there, once you let it dry, you can use some grayish or tan spray paint. And once that dries, you're ready to cut a hole into your piñata so you can add some candy. So the body of the piñata is pretty hard after all the layers, and it should be completely dry before you start trying to cut the entrance. In this case, I am cutting kind of a triangle shape, just two lines, so that it creates kind of a flap that you can open and close. I'm using one of those utility razor blades. Be careful not to cut yourself. Once I opened the flap, I realized that one of the buried wires was right next to the opening. So I just needed to shove that aside. You can see it there on the right where I'm trying to fold it under. In the process of cutting the hole for the candy into the piñata, some of the layers of the paper mache started to come apart. So I'm just applying a little bit of glue to stick them back together. Last but not least, we have to put some candy in our piñata. And in this case, I chose a bit of honey. just because it's a wasp nest. But you can stuff it with whatever kind of candy you like. To close up the hole at the top, you can either just press it down so that it fits back into where it came from, or you can glue it into place if you want to make it really secure. And there you go.